All right, so looks like we're just about ready to get started. Everyone can see my screen, I assume, and so let's get going. So the first chapter, we'll call it, of what we're doing tonight is going to be reading the ice. Now, I don't know how many of you are experienced skips or even vices versus how many of you are new to being in the house, but being in the house is definitely a unique experience. So ice reading, what is ice reading? Well, it's learning how the ice surface works in concert with a club's stones. So interestingly, we talk about the ice as well as the stones when we're talking about ice reading. So ice may be swingy, it may be straight, it may be fast, it may be slow. But a lot of that is the rock conditions as much as it is the ice conditions. So it's interesting that we talk about rocks as much as we do about ice. The stones, in fact, cause most of the variability on a particular sheet. So the sheet of ice is the sheet of ice, right? And it's not going to change significantly throughout the game. It will change a little bit. But the variability is from stone to stone. So you might have some stones that are slower, some stones that are faster, some that curl more, some that are straighter. And that's the variability that you're going to see in the midst of a game, other than the standard changes in the ice conditions, which we're going to talk about. Okay, and this is why top players spend so much time considering their stones. All of the top competitive curlers have what they call rock books. So it's actually a little notepad that they keep notes about each of the individual rocks in the higher level competitions. So there's only a few sets of stones that are used in these higher level competitions. And so they keep notes on them, and they know what those individual rocks do. And actually, when you look at the finals of a really top high level competition, so for example, the Brier or the Scotties, or the Olympics or World Championships, things at that level, in the final, they're allowed to choose any rocks they want from any sheet. They don't just have to use the rocks that are on the sheet that they're assigned to. And so it's good to have that rock book, and it's good to have rocks that do different things. When you're hitting at high weight, you want a rock that runs straight. When you're trying to draw in around a guard, you want a rock that curls more. So you might even see throughout the game, those higher level curlers might switch which stones they use based on the shot call. Okay, so who should read the ice? So I'm asking you this question. So why don't we have somebody raise a hand and tell me who they think should read the ice?
Where's my raise the hand?
Is that C. Pollock? Is your hand raised?
Yes.
So
yes.
Who do you think should read the ice? What's your name?
Everyone. Everyone.
What's your name?
Chris Pollock.
Chris. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, everyone. So I'm going to remute you now and lower your hand. So yes, everyone should read the ice. It's the whole team's responsibility. Good job. And it's about communication. So this is why we do all that yelling in the midst of a shot. So it's not just for fun, it's for communication. So if you're yelling at the top of your lungs at your teammates that they need to sweep, and they're telling you in a quiet voice that it's heavy, and they don't think they should be sweeping, you might have a communication problem. So for those of you who yell at the top of your lungs, it might not be necessary. Food for thought. And it helps you to visualize your next shot. So if you're reading the ice conditions and you know you have to make a draw on your next shot, well, it'll help you with making that shot and visualizing it yourself. It's not just about the shot that's going on. So skips learn about topography. There are peaks and valleys in the ice. Now we have a lot of curlers in the room tonight, but some of us are from dedicated clubs and others are from arena clubs. Those who are from the arena clubs know full well about peaks and valleys. But those of us who curl at dedicated clubs, this might not be as obvious. The ice does have tracks in it. It does have areas where warm feet wear the ice down, or you might have frost building up on the edges and things like that that will help create these peaks and valleys. Not to mention the scraper patterns that your ice crew does and things of that nature. And there are different kinds of ice conditions, built up versus worn down. We're showing in the graphic here. Obviously built up, meaning we're adding pebble every time we have a draw. We're adding more and more pebble, but we're not necessarily wearing it down. And towards the center of the sheet, it might get worn down more. Now, throughout the course of a game, you might see this condition change. So what you'll see is the ice might speed up for a few ends, and then it might slow down at the end of the game. When it slows down, it might, in your eyes, curl more, or what some jargon terms we might use would be get fudgy or get swingy. And that's where the pebble gets so flat that the stone has a hard finish. It really curls hard at the very end. So let's talk about some ice conditions. Peaked ice, right? So that's where the stones curl to the corners, but not necessarily curl towards the middle. There's dished ice. That's where the stones curl to the middle, but not necessarily to the corners. There's sloped ice, where all the stones are curling in one direction, regardless of what handle you put on, what spin, counterclockwise or clockwise, in-turn or out-turn. Those are the different jargon terms that we use. If this happens, it's sometimes referred to as negative ice. So if you're trying to rotate your handle counterclockwise so that the stone naturally would curl from right to left, but the ice is sloped the way this picture shows, it's going to go left to right. So if the spin of the stone is trying to go right to left, but the ice conditions is forcing it to go left to right, that's an example of negative ice. Or the easy way of putting it is it's curling the wrong direction, right? When it curls the wrong direction, that's negative ice. There are runs, and that's when the stone finds a particular spot and can't get out of it. There are falls out on the edges of sheets. Sometimes we see this on the sheet that's up against the wall. And there are breaks. The rock travels consistently until it hits a certain spot and then curls like crazy. Let's pause for a second. Let's have a hand raised situation here. What would be an example of something that could cause a break like that? In terms of ice conditions we're talking about.
Debris on the ice.
Debris on the ice is what I would call a pick. That's not necessarily an ice condition that would cause a break, but you might see the same type of movement out of the stone. So yes, you're partially correct, but we're looking, John, in terms of an ice condition.
Okay.
Good job, though. Thank you. Somebody else have their hand raised?
Daniel does.
Go ahead, Daniel.
It could be a warm spot caused by a door or the HVAC system.
Perfect. Very good. That's exactly what I was thinking. So if you have a heater that's hanging over sheet C in the middle of the sheet, you might see a break in the middle of sheet C. Or if you have a door on the edge of sheet A, you might see a break at that spot on sheet A. So you want to look at all those kinds of conditions. Where are the doors? Where are the heaters? For those of us who curl on arena ice, the big doors where the Zamboni enters and exits, do you leave those doors open, or do you close them while you're playing? I will tell you, we have found significant improvement on our ice at Long Island Curling Club just by closing those doors as much as possible. So we load all of our equipment on and off the ice through those doors, but then as soon as we're done loading, we close those doors up. So just food for thought. Good, thank you.
Dion also has their hand up.
Oh, Dion, go ahead, please.
Could be the pebble is starting to break down in a certain spot or flatten out because of footprints, or excessive sweeping.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Dion. So particularly late in the game, ends 7 and 8, we'll say, you might see conditions where if there's a particular area where the pebble has gotten flat, either through warm shoes or excessive use of that particular spot on the sheet where the stones are running over it consistently, you might see breaks. And that's what we were referring to earlier, fudgy ice or ice getting wacky, you might hear people call it sometimes. Good, thank you, Dion. So let's break down the ice. So as the pebble breaks down, it's going to get faster through, this is saying through the third end, but we'll say through the first third of the game. You might see the ice speed up, and then it's going to maintain speed throughout the middle of the game, and then towards the end of the game, it tends to flatten or slow down and also get swingier. So when that pebble is flat, you most often see it in the sliding path. So normally I would ask, who knows why, but I'm going to skip over that just for the sake of keeping this moving along. And I will just tell you, more often than not, curlers tend not to cool down their sliders. And when they're sliding down the sliding path on a warm foot, they're going to excessively melt the pebble early in the game. And then late in the game, that will get noticed. So this is not just for skips or strategists. This is for every curler. You should be cooling down your slider either behind the hack or along the sidelines before every game. It will make a difference in those later ends of the game if we're all sliding on cold sliders. And I'm not talking about a second or two. I'm talking 20, 30 seconds of getting your slider cold before you put your foot in a playable surface. It's going to happen anyway. So the sliding path will break down the fastest of anywhere on the sheet, but let's do our best to prevent that from happening as much as possible. So there's my PSA for the night. That's not true. I'm going to give you a lot of PSAs. Okay, so flat spots, as we said, result in unpredictable curl. So thank you, Dion, for noting that. And it will slow down. So you're going to get slower and you're going to get swingier in certain spots towards the end of the game. Okay, so now let's talk about the run of the stone. There are generally 3 stages. I'm going to just pull them all up so we can talk about all of them. The first stage is from the point of release, which should be at or near the near hog line. And the stone is going to run relatively straight. Almost perfectly straight during this period. The stone is at its fastest, right? As soon as we let go, the stone starts to slow down until it gets to the far end of the sheet where it stops, right? So it's constantly decelerating, constantly slowing down. So when it's at its fastest is as soon as you let it go. And during that time, the stone is going to run its straightest. Then the second stage, the size of it varies from club to club. But you're going to see in this second stage, the beginning of the movement of the stone. So as the stone settles into its path and it starts to grip the ice a little bit, it will start to curl. And then you're going to see at that point in between stages 2 and 3 is what we call the break. And the break is where we switch over into stage 3. And then in stage 3, we have most of the curl taking place, or what we would call the finish. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and we can call on you. Okay, moving on.
No questions yet.
Yeah, thanks. So let's talk about team tactics. So what should a team be doing throughout the game? So we're going to talk about the person throwing. We're going to talk about the sweepers. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the skip. So throughout the game. And, of course, in all instances, we have to talk about team communication. So let's get started with during the shot. So the thrower. Who can tell me what the thrower should be doing during the shot?
The thrower can communicate what they think they threw, right? If they knew they were light or heavy, they should be communicating that to the sweepers.
Good, thank you, Dan. Gina, I see your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
They should also make sure that they are communicating if anything wonky happened, if they wobbled, if they put a push or a pull on it, because that'll let their sweepers know what to communicate to the skip.
Great, good job, Gina. It's almost as if you've seen these PowerPoints before. So the first thing I will say is we often see with beginning curlers, they let go of that rock, they stand up, they turn around, and they walk back towards the hack because their job is done. They've already let go. Well, I'm here to tell you that is not the case. The thrower has a lot of work to do. So as soon as we let go of that rock, we're going to communicate what we think as the thrower. So as soon as you let go, you have actually more information than anybody else on the team at that point. So you can say, I think I was heavy. I think I was light. Oh, I pushed it. Don't trust your stopwatch if people are using stopwatches, right? You can say I was wide, I was narrow, I think it was on broom. Any of those kinds of things. Immediately, as soon as you let go, you should say something to your sweepers if you are the thrower.
Now, Matt, for those arena curlers out there,
Yeah.
some of our leads will not be on the call here, and those new skips should be encouraging those folks to be communicating this, should they not?
Absolutely. So we as skips and we as leaders of our teams and we as experienced curlers all collectively should always be mentoring our newer curlers. So if they're not doing something that you know is important to a team dynamic, you should be mentoring them and encouraging them to do those things. And communication is the hardest thing to do when you're new. When a skip says to a brand new sweeper, where is it? The last thing they want to do is be wrong and yell out, it's in the house, when it's actually a guard or something of that nature, right? So, but it's important, even if they're wrong, it's important to foster communication and get them to talk. So what I do with some of the drills when I'm teaching beginning curlers, as soon as the thrower lets go of the rock, they have to say something. Even if they're wrong, they have to say something. It could easily be, I fell down, right? It doesn't have to be about the shot, but they have to say something. And that's a drill that we go through with my beginning curlers when I'm teaching my lessons at the two clubs where I teach. So back to our presentation here. So I encourage throwers, watch your stone for the full length of the ice. You can learn how the ice is playing on your shot, but you can also communicate. When you watch the curlers that are on TV, the thrower is yelling as much as the skip about the line. You always hear two voices when they're communicating on TV. So note the rate of curl. So watch early, middle, and late. We'll see those three stages that we talked about. When you're throwing, you can see that and you can learn where the break point is. Is it 6 feet in front of the hog line, 10 feet in front of the hog line, right underneath that heater or right next to that door that we were talking about earlier? Those are all things that we can learn and adapt to. Okay, during the shot, what should the sweepers be doing? Obviously, they're going to sweep. What else?
This is an
Phil
easy one.
West.
They should be communicating. Oh, there we go.
Phil West, I see.
Yeah, they should be communicating with everybody as to how they feel the speed is and things like that. They should be talking a lot.
Right, exactly. The sweepers are in charge of the weight, the speed of the stone. Also, sweepers, you can watch your opponent's stones. If you are a stopwatch user and you like to time rocks, time your opponent's rocks. One thing I will say, and this is not necessarily part of today's presentation, but something that I focus on in the lessons that I teach, hog to hog timing is going to be accurate for every curler, regardless of the way that they release the rock. So if you have a stick curler or somebody who pushes or somebody who pulls or somebody who rides the rock like a sled, all of the above will have different times, back to hog or tee to hog, but they're all going to have the same times, hog to hog. So if you're a sweeper and you want to learn from your opponent's rocks, sweep hog to hog or time hog to hog and see what kind of times you get and how does that compare to your team. Now, the last thing is getting in the shot. So stand at the hog line or just past the hog line, and then after the person throwing slides past you, you can slip in behind them and watch the path of the stone from behind the thrower. You want to learn as much information as you can every shot, even your opponent's shots. The team that learns the ice the fastest most likely is the one that's going to win. That's statistically evident.
Hey, Matt, we have a question from the chat from Danielle.
Go ahead, Danielle.
When you're arena curling, you're trying to keep the game moving because we have very limited play time and ice times are expensive. How do you balance having the game move quickly and having the thrower watch the stone, call the line, etc.?
Well, don't forget that the thrower is not throwing the next rock. The opposing team is throwing the next rock. So you as the thrower can, after your shot and after watching the shot, get to the side of the sheet and get out of the way and still have your opponent's entire shot to get ready for your next shot. Or if you've thrown two, to get your gripper on and get ready to sweep or what have you. So there's always time in between your shots to utilize. Obviously, the more comfortable we get on the ice, on our sliders, we can walk around and slide around without falling over and being worried about falling over. So the more experience we get sliding around on that, that'll save a second or two here or there. But there's always going to be enough time to watch your shot and stay involved, and then use the time that your opponent is throwing to get ready for the next shot. Good question, though. Thank you. Okay, now the skip during the shot. So obviously, before the person throws, you're going to hold the broom. I say on the tee line. Who can tell me why we hold the broom on the tee line? Rich Goodwin, welcome, buddy.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. You hold it on the tee line for consistency, because if you hold it above or below the tee line, it's hard to make it consistent. And if you always hold it on tee line, you're getting the angle consistently.
Good, great job, Rich. So if I can translate what Rich said, the tee line has a distinct measurement. So if you're trying to draw to the button and you know that you're holding the broom at the edge of the 8-foot, you know, or rather the shooter knows that the skip is looking for 4 feet of curl, because we know from the center line to the edge of the 8-foot is 4 feet. Or if you know, for example, that it only curls 2 feet and you're trying to draw to the button, you shouldn't have your broom on the edge of the 8-foot. You should have it on the edge of the 4-foot, because that's 2 feet. So we know distinctly where the circles cross the tee line and where the center and sidelines, of course, cross the tee line. We can have exact measurements to determine how much curl we're getting on particular shots. Now, this will vary for hits and taps. So obviously, if you're doing hits and taps, you're going to measure off of the stone. So for example, if you're getting 6 inches of curl on a hit, on normal hit weight, you want to hold the broom 6 inches off of the center of the rock, assuming you're trying to hit nose, that sort of a thing. Does that make sense to everybody? We're going to use the sheet to measure so that we can be exact and consistent and precise in our expectation of the curl. So in any game, if I walk up to you and you're the skip and it's the middle of the game and I say, how much is it curling? You should be able to tell me an exact number. It's curling about 3.5 feet, right? You should be able to know that number because you can measure it on the tee line, as well as a memory aid. Rock, you have your hand raised. Question?
Yeah, so the question is, I'm only a second-year curler, and the question is related to what you said early on in the presentation of rocks versus ice conditions.
Yeah.
So during the game, is this something that a more experienced curler might be able to pick out a stone, or is this something that teams are doing, you know, before or after games and trying to match stones and measure stones from that
Yeah,
perspective?
more often than not, it's before and after games. But sometimes
Gotcha.
you might see in the middle of a game, a particular curler might say, oh, I think, for example, a vice is throwing like the 5 and the 6 rocks, right? So the vice might say to the skip halfway through the game, oh, I think the 6 is curling more than the 5. Something like that. You might want to give me a little extra ice with the 6. Now, sometimes that might be the way that the vice is releasing the rock that day, and they're just blaming it on the rock. But the more experienced curlers sometimes might be able to pick up something of that nature throughout a game. Remember, you only get to throw each rock once per end, so it's going to take 4 or 5, maybe even 6 ends before you can figure something like that out. So it's not something that's going to happen very often. More than likely, it's going to be before and after the game. Good question, though. Thank you, Rock. Okay, we're also going to watch the thrower's release to temper your read. So for those of you, I think you guys can see the video of me. So I'm going to use my hand. When a thrower is releasing the rock and they flare their hand out, the rock is not released on the line of delivery, which means it will not curl as much. Or if they push the rock in, it's going to look like it's over curling because it's not released on the line of delivery. That is not the ice conditions. That is not the rock conditions. That is the way that the thrower released the rock. So you want to see if the thrower looks like they threw the rock out or pushed it in, or did not slide their body along the line of delivery, because that could happen as well. That will immediately change your expectation for that shot as a skip. Does that make sense to everyone? Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Oh, we have a training tip or a pro tip. Remain behind the tee line and point your broom head at the rock as it travels towards you. So what we're talking about, and I don't have my broom with me here in the room tonight, but you are using the broom, so you're keeping your eye on the line of delivery. So the line of delivery, of course, right, is always from the hack through the sheet all the way to the head of your broom. And then if your body is behind the broom along that line of delivery and your eye is on that line, you will more easily be able to see if the rock is on the line of delivery or not. If you're standing off to the side and you're holding the broom out here, your eye is not on that line of delivery. It's going to be harder to see if the thrower hit the broom or not. So you always want to line up the hack that the person is throwing from, your broom head, and your eye should all be on one straight line, which means when you're holding the broom, you're not necessarily holding it straight perpendicular to the sheet of ice, right? You're going to be holding it, and I'm going to exaggerate here, along that line of delivery so that the broom is actually on a very, very slight angle. Of course, this is much exaggerated, but I think you get the idea. Then, once they release, move the broom head across the ice as the stone curls towards you. So, more specifically, what I would like to say here is move your eye across the ice as the stone curls towards you. So you want to immediately after they've released and after you've determined whether the stone is wide, narrow, or on broom, you want to step to the point where you anticipate the stone coming to. And you're going to use your body as the judge. So if the stone is not necessarily curling towards you as much as you thought it would, it's not going to curl as much. Or if it's coming towards your body faster than you thought it would, it might be over curling. So you're going to use that judgment. And then, of course, every time you re-up your expectations, you want to move your body and move your body. So if you're saying it's going to over curl, move your body a little further over so that you're always using that body as the benchmark for whether or not the stone is curling to your expectations. All right, any questions about that before we move on? Good, let's keep going. Communication. So when you're throwing, you want to learn to feel your release. We kind of talked about this. Did you start the stone? That means sort of pitching it inward. Did you flare the stone? That means sort of pitching it outward. Tell the skip after the shot. Like if the skip says, oh, that didn't curl as much as I thought it was going to, you could say, no, it was me. I flared it out, right? But also, more importantly, tell your sweepers immediately. I think it's wide. Don't sweep right away. You're going to hold it out, right? We don't want to give the skip an opportunity to misread the ice. With sweepers, obviously, the responsibility is to focus on the speed of the stone or the weight. You should communicate any kind of abnormal release. So is it a flat handle? Is it a spinner? Is it, did it pick? If you think it might have picked or something like that. But you definitely should not be calling the line. How many times have you heard sweepers say, it's starting to curl, it's starting to curl, right? That's not your responsibility. There's already 2 people on your team looking at that. And of course, you want to watch the thrower's release. You want to learn stone speed and how the stone will travel on that line. Now, this is an important one. If you're on a competitive curling team, you generally stay on the same side throughout the whole game, same side of the sheet. So you have to own that sheet. If you know that a particular line is slower or faster, you should be communicating that to your teammates as a sweeper. And of course, you always want to have these things help you with your own release, should you need that. Okay, any questions about reading the ice before we move on?
No one has their hand up.
Good, thank you, Dan, appreciate it.
You must be doing a great job.
Okay, so moving right along. Let's talk about basic strategy. Curling, the only thing you're winning is a hernia. Not true. Okay, who can tell me, let's do a hand raise, who can tell me the difference between strategy and tactics? Jeff Greenberg, I see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, okay, there I am.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. Strategy is what type of game you want to play. Like if you want to play a hitting game, or or if you want to play a draw game, and the tactics are what type of shots you're going to throw in order to achieve that.
Good job. So to translate what Jeff said, strategy is the objective and the plan, and tactics is how you execute the plan. Good job, Jeff. Really nice. So strategy is the end. Jason? Hey, Jason, welcome.
Hey, I was just thinking, I was thinking strategy is long-term and tactics is more short-term. Like, what
Well,
over?
we can have different types of strategy. We can have strategy for a season or a bonspiel or one game or one end or even one shot, right? So we can have strategies of different timelines, but the strategy is the objective and the tactic is how you're going to achieve that objective. So for example, the strategy might be we want to win first event tournament champion at a bonspiel this season, and the tactic we're going to do to achieve that is practice more. Or we may want to score 2 this end, and the tactic we're going to use to obtain that goal is throw some guards. So there's always some goal and then a way to achieve that goal. So the strategy is the goal, the tactic is the way that we achieve that goal. Does that make sense, Jason? Yes, I see you nodding. Good. Good question. And welcome. I didn't see you on the list. So strategy is the plan, tactic is how you execute. Okay, so the basic strategy for curling is to take 2 points with the hammer and force the other team to 1 when you don't have the hammer. I think that's been told to us since day 1 of curling, but I don't know if it necessarily was explained why, and we're going to show you. So you're the red team, and this is the scoreboard. Traditional scoreboard, so the numbers across the top are the end you're in. So if we have the hammer and we score 2, and they have the hammer, we hold them to 1. We're going to, in an 8-end game, win the game 8-4 every time. So this is sort of counterintuitive to most Americans, because most American sports, the objective is to score more and to score at every opportunity. So we're telling ourselves we don't necessarily need to score at every opportunity. So it's a new experience for a lot of new curlers. So does this make sense to everyone? If you achieve your objective of taking 2 with and forcing the 1 without every end, you're going to win every game. All right, so this is a little worksheet that we're going to complete together. When I do this presentation live with people, you would have a piece of paper that looks like this in front of you, but we'll just do it on the screen together. So when you have the hammer, we're going to start with that. When you have the hammer, what is our objective? We just said it. I see people doing this. Yes, take 2, correct. What would be acceptable? Yes, same people holding fingers up, correct. Taking 1, or a blank is acceptable. A blank is acceptable with the hammer because you get to keep the hammer. What would be unacceptable? Somebody can raise their hand. What would be unacceptable? Jeff, go ahead. Got to unmute yourself, Jeff.
There we go. A steal.
A steal, right. If the other team is taking 1 or more, that would be very much unacceptable. And then, of course, there's always a bonus. What would be a bonus?
Is that me still? Or oh.
Well, let's give somebody else a chance.
Oh, okay.
I can't see the names of who has their hand raised.
Phil West and Jeff Greenberg do.
Phil, go ahead.
3 or more.
Right, more than 2. Exactly. Good job. Right? So that's when you have the hammer. That's your objective, your acceptable, your unacceptable, and your bonus. But what about when you don't have the hammer? What would be our objective when we don't have the hammer? Jason, go ahead.
Holding them to a 1 or
Holding them to 1, exactly. Good. And who else had a hand up? What would be acceptable? Somebody
Evelyn.
else. Evelyn, go ahead.
Steal. Steal 1 or 2.
Not quite yet, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So acceptable is not necessarily ideal, but we're okay with it. Anybody else? Sorry, Dan, if you could help me out. I'm not seeing who has.
Dion, me.
Go ahead, Dion.
Acceptable is if they take 2.
Right, very good. Giving up 2 is acceptable because when we saw from the previous slide, Their objective when they have the hammer is to take 2. So if you give them 2, yeah, they've obtained their objective, but it's not the end of the world because you can take 2 the next end to even it up. What would be unacceptable?
They're getting more than 2.
Thank you, Evelyn. More than 2. Now, Evelyn, since you're still on talking mode here, what would be the bonus?
Stealing.
There you go. Stealing is not up to us. We can try to steal and we can create a situation where we put ourselves in a good position to steal, but ultimately the other team has the hammer. So through their own efforts with their rocks, they essentially get to decide whether or not we can steal. So that would be a bonus. Now, what's the one thing that's not shown on the without the hammer side of the chart here?
Blank.
A blank.
Blank. Who can tell me why you don't have blank as an end goal when you don't have the hammer? Dan,
Because you
wanna,
don't get the hammer back.
Dan, you want to pick somebody else that's has their hand up?
Sure, Mike or
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
You don't have the option to, you don't have the power to blank. That's on them. They've got the last rock.
That's right. Good job, Mike, and welcome, buddy. Didn't see you on the list either. Good job. So when you do not have the hammer, it's not your choice whether to blank or not blank. You can give them an opportunity where they will try for a blank. In other words, you can hit every rock out of the house in its entirety and have a completely blank house with that hammer rock to go, and they can still draw to the house and score 1. So it's not your decision as a team without the hammer of whether or not to blank. So we can't make that a goal of ours if we don't get to decide it with our tactics. Good job, Mike. Thank you. All right, so let's divide the sheet into thirds. So the inner third is obviously the middle of the sheet there, and then the outer thirds are the 2 outsides. When we have the hammer, we want to direct play to the outer thirds, and we want to remove opponents' rocks from the inner thirds, right? So we want to keep that inner third open and available so that when we have the hammer, we can always draw the button in the end. With the control zone is the area of the sheet that you want to control. So whoever controls this area, and we're talking about between the 4-foot strings and from the T line to about the middle guard area, what we would call a 2 guard, that area is the control zone. The hammer team controls this zone by keeping it open. The non-hammer team controls this zone by keeping it filled with rocks, okay? So you want to own that control zone. So you want to move rocks out or behind the T line, and when you hit, you want to roll away from the control zone. This is with the hammer. Offensive versus defensive. Who can tell me the difference between offensive and defensive?
Jordan?
You're,
Jordan or Jeff or Jeff Tonoli?
Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, guys. You're talking about risk versus reward, right? So offensive, you're going high risk, high reward. Defensive, you're going low risk, lower reward.
Very good, Jordan. You didn't fall into my trap, but good job. So in typical American sports, offensive strategy tends to be the more aggressive strategy. And in curling, hitting tends to be defensive. So it's sort of the opposite of what we normally see in typical American sports. So for offensive strategy, as Jordan said, we're going high risk, high reward, or in curling lingo, what we might call messing it up. So with the hammer, we're going to use the top of the outer third. So we're going to see higher guards in play. And when the rocks are in the house, they're going to be at the very top of the house. So we're going to utilize corner guards. And then we're going to draw behind those guards. Hitting is limited when we're playing offensively. So yellow throws the center guard, red ignores it and throws the corner guard. Yellow goes in the house, red ignores it and throws the corner guard. Red is now going in behind the corner guard. Jordan, you have another question?
I don't know if Jordan does. Jeff Tolley has his hand up. I think that's it.
Jeff, go ahead.
Oh, and it's down.
I got nothing. I was just for the last one.
Okay, no problem. We'll get you on the next one. Okay, so that's offensive. We're putting guards in play. We have more rocks in play. Higher risk, high reward. Now a defensive strategy is going to be the opposite. It's going to be keeping it clean. So with the hammer, we're going to play into the rings. If we play guards, they're going to be tight to the house. So you can see our zones here are a little tighter and further down into the house. Still always keeping the rocks in front of the tee line. That's an important distinction, and we'll talk about that later. So the tactics we might use, fewer guards, and when we do play guards, they're tight to the house and play in the house, and more hitting. Sorry. So does that make sense to everybody? I know I went through that kind of quickly, but does anybody have any questions before we move on? All right, let's keep going then. So again, we're going to do the worksheet together on the screen here. So this is without the hammer. We're going to direct play to the inner thirds, or the inner third, excuse me. And we're going to control that inner third, and we're going to remove opponent's rocks and then roll towards center. So red goes in to the center. Oh, this is the bad animation. There's no yellow team in this animation. Okay, now the control zone. We're going to own this without the hammer by putting our rocks into that control zone. And when we're hitting, we're going to roll into that control zone. I'm sorry. So the control zone you see is the same size and shape as before, but the difference is without the hammer, we're controlling it by keeping that open. There's no rocks there, or with the hammer. And without the hammer, now we're controlling it by putting rocks into that control zone. Okay? If you have questions, if I'm going too fast, just raise your hand or pop up into the chat there. Okay, so we said offensive strategy is messing it up. So without hammer, we're going to play into the top of the inner third. So again, higher guards. When we put rocks in the house, we're keeping them higher in the house. We're going to utilize center guards. You can tell this is a Canadian PowerPoint because it's Centra. We're going to draw in behind those guards. And hitting is limited. This is offensive strategy without the hammer. Now, defensive strategy without the hammer. We're going to keep it clean. So we're going to play into the house. You can see our zone is shrunk quite a bit. When we have guards, they're going to be very tight to the house. But again, keeping the rocks in front of the tee line. So fewer guards, tight to the house, play is in the house, more hitting. And when we hit and we roll towards the center to try and keep that control zone full of rocks. So defensive strategy without the hammer, playing into the center. Any questions? Okay.
We have one from Jeff, it looks like.
Jeff, go ahead.
So Matt, would you say that since your goal without the hammer is to force one, that it's better to put your first rocks in the house rather than throwing guards, because wouldn't that be playing more to score?
Let me rephrase what you said, okay?
Sure, go ahead.
So if you're trying to play defensive and you want to limit your opponent to 1, the tactic you're going to choose is to put the rock into the house so that you can play a hit game, because a hitting game is defensive.
Yes.
If you want to play offensive and force your opponent to 1, you're going to put guards in play and then draw behind those guards to shrink the scoring window for your opponent so that they only have that hammer to draw around and in for 1.
Right.
So in both cases, you have very, very different tactics that achieve the same objective. So that's why we have different styles of strategy and different styles of tactic. And you have to play what you feel comfortable with as a team. So for example, if you know that your teammates are not very good at hitting, I would not suggest a defensive strategy.
Right.
If the ice, let's say you're playing in an arena and the ice is curling 12 feet negative, I would not suggest a defensive strategy at that point, because it's going to be very difficult to accurately hit a rock. Right? So there's a lot of things that would determine whether you wanted to be offensive or defensive, but the goal is always to force your opponent to 1 when they have the hammer. Does that make sense, Jeff? Yeah. All right, good. Good question. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. So we're going to play an end. Now, when you have the hammer, you're playing to the outer thirds. That's the lighter blue. Without the hammer, you're playing to the inner third. That's the lighter blue here. And the control zone is that area there. These are your offensive zones. So with the hammer, we're playing higher corner guards and we're drawing around them. Without the hammer, we're playing higher corner guards and we're drawing towards the center under them. And these are your defensive zones. So with the hammer, we're playing to the outside still, but tighter to the house or in the house. And without the hammer, also tighter to the house and in the house, but into that inner third. All right, so let's hear from somebody we haven't heard from yet. Somebody want to raise your hand. You're going to go first. You're going to be the yellow rock, or in this case, we'll do black rocks. And somebody raise your hand and tell me if you want to be offensive or defensive without the hammer. Somebody we haven't heard from yet. Anybody? Ann Kirkpatrick, go ahead. You might need to unmute yourself, Ann. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I thought you were gonna
There you
unmute.
go. That's okay.
Let's go offensive.
Offensive without the hammer, we're going to be the Black Rocks. So what is your tactic going to be? What shot are you going to call for?
I'm gonna go for a high guard.
And where's that guard going to go?
Geez.
Corner
that's
or
right.
center?
That's right. We're doing the perfect world here, aren't we?
Yeah, perfect world. Corner or center?
So we do not have the hammer. So we're going to be center. We're going to control the middle third.
That's your rock right there.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, not the best drawing in this program, but okay. Ann, you can stay with us now. Somebody else who wants to be the hammer team? Somebody we haven't heard from. Don't all speak up at once.
Come on, Jen.
Jen, you're getting called out. We're going to go with Jen, whoever Jen is.
Well, I have to find Jen if that's the case. When somebody puts their hand up, I will unmute them, and then they have to unmute themselves as well. But anyone here of the 185 plus participants can put their hand up and answer a question.
All right,
We
I
have
see there-
one.
Go ahead.
Jason Thomas.
Well, I think I would try to be a little bit more maybe defensive on hammer and try to get a close guard or almost touching on the side.
On the side. So you want to go like that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Now it's Ann's turn. We're back to Ann's team. Now what are you going to do, Ann?
So since I'm gonna be offensive, I'm gonna try to come right around.
So
I'm gonna draw in.
yeah, Ann has two options, right? She can either draw in or she can put another guard up, right? And she's opted to draw in. So we're going to go behind our guard like that. That's a little ugly, but you get the picture. And Jason, you're up again. So now you said you're going to play defensive, right?
Yeah. So if I'm playing defensive, I want to stay tighter and closer to the T line, right?
So you're saying you want to come in behind your guard?
Yeah, if I come in behind my guard right to the 8 foot, right in the area, yeah.
Okay. And now Ann, back to you.
So I'm without the hammer. I'm playing offense. I might want to come down and maybe sit on him.
Sit on him. So you're saying here?
Yes.
You could. That's a difficult shot.
Yep. Yeah, but I'm don't throwing perfect draws. My team is just awesome.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, you might be able to do that. Sure.
What would you call, Matt?
Don't forget, our objective is to force them to one, right? We don't always need to be the counting rock. The shapes of these stones are not perfect, but these two maybe are a measure. We don't know. So one thing you could do is draw down to this one.
Yep.
And if it happens to bump this one up a little bit, now you're counting with a bunch of rocks in front.
Yep.
Right, so that's an option. You could also do another guard would be an option.
No, I like the
a little higher. The point is staying in the control zone works for you here because we're trying to force them to one and we're junking up the control zone.
Yeah, I like that. I like it right there.
Right, and so the option that you mentioned first, in a perfect world, a freeze, of course, is a very difficult shot. In a perfect world, we make it. You're sitting pretty well, but that rock's not going to be in your control zone at that point.
Right.
And you're playing offensive without the hammer. We want to have lots of rocks in that control zone.
Okay.
Okay, and Jason.
Well, would it be worth it to get rid of the guard right now?
Yeah, so that's actually perfect, right? So you identified we're playing defensive. We want to keep that control zone open. And right now I've got 3 rocks in that control zone junking me up. So it's early enough in the end we can bail out. You can hit, roll yours out, and then get rid of this guy, right?
Yeah.
So get the eraser out. So this guy's gone. And then our shooter ends up as a guard for us. Good. And then Ann, back to you.
So if that guard was an annoyance, then I'd like to put it back.
Exactly. So now we get into the repetition of how many times do we try to clear the guard. So since this is the beginner strategy session, we're going to end there. We're not going to play the whole end out, right? But that's the idea, is you're going to keep junking it up until the end where Jason is going to have to ultimately draw for the point. Right? That's the idea.
All right.
So good job, both of you. Okay, so we're going to skip through all this because we're going to do intermediate strategy. Okay, good job, guys. Does anybody have any questions while we're pulling up the next program here?
I don't see any hands up, but I'll just remind people, if you do want to make a comment, put your hand up. I will unmute you, and then you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, just checking through the chat screen here. Rock was saying for Jason to start peeling, and that was exactly what we did. So you were spot on, Rock. Good job. Curtis is saying we're going to need a measurement, or Curtis, at least somebody better at drawing circles on a PowerPoint screen, one of the two. All right, so now we're going to bump ourselves up to intermediate strategy. So we did the basics, and now we're going to add a little bit more, and we'll do some more strategy board at the end, and then that'll be it. So, okay, this is just a bit of a recap of what we just went over, so I'm going to go kind of quickly. Strategy versus tactics. Of course, strategy is the plan. Tactics is how you execute that plan. So there's a team-specific approach to shot selection or tactics. So we have the broader style. That's our high end of the funnel, is what is our team's style? Are we a hitting team? Are we an offensive team? Do we like to play taps, things like that? A game plan, which is our plan for the specific end, or for the specific game rather. How are the ice conditions? What is our opponent play like? Things like that. And then of course the end goal. What does the scoreboard dictate? You know, are we in the early part of the game, the later part of the game? Those kinds of things will help determine the end goal. So let's start with basic style. So a team's shot-making decisions are determined by, well, first of all, their ability. If you're not good at making hits, you're not going to call a lot of hits. Secondly, resilience for a wide range of game situations. So that's the risk reward that I think it was Jordan mentioned earlier. If you have a wider willingness to take those risks, you might end up being a little bit more offensive. If you're not willing to take as many risks, you might be a little more defensive. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about a third option as well. So what is your team's philosophy? Well, if you're just doing pickup games and you've never played with the other 3 people on your team's philosophy is going to be, let's have some fun together and it doesn't really matter. But if you're playing competitively and you play together a lot with those 3 other teammates, you're going to build a team philosophy. So this philosophy is reflected in the most successful types of shots and your resilience for risk versus reward. Now, this is what I was just talking about. There are 3 basic styles: offensive, defensive. Those are the 2 we've talked about already. Can anybody tell me what the third one is? Jeff, go ahead.
Mixed style. You can.
That's right. Balanced. Very good. So balanced is the third option. And I will tell you this much. For those of you that know me and play against me regularly, you probably could have figured this out by now. I tend to play a balanced style. When I do not have the hammer, I tend to be more defensive. And when I do have the hammer, I tend to be more offensive. I find that that works for me. I like to take risks when I have the hammer and get that big score. And I try to minimize risks when my opponent has the hammer, trying to force them to 1 at all times. I don't very often go for steals, unless, of course, the end dictates there's a bunch of misses or what have you. I tend not to play for steals very often. So somebody like me, you would call a balanced style. Okay, offense versus defense. So you guys don't have the worksheet in front of you, so we're just going to do this together. But some things that, in terms of starting style, so some things that would be offense first, some words. Aggressive, create scoring. Risky, attack. Finesse. Now, who can tell me why finesse is on there? Go ahead, Jason.
You have to be able to have a finessey kind of shot if you're going to take risks, like if you're going to try to go around something or bounce off of stones or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Offensive shots are guards and draws, right? Or tap backs maybe. But in all those cases, you have to have that finesse to be as precise as you need to be for those kinds of shots. Very good. And quickly understands ice conditions. I briefly said this earlier, but more often than not, the team that reads the ice the fastest tends to be the one to win. And we have statistics that can prove that. Okay, defense first. Tends to be more conservative. It's a little counterintuitive. You're hitting, you think it's aggressive, but it's actually more conservative. Patient for chances. So like I said before when I was talking about my own style, I don't go for steals unless the situation dictates. But when that situation does dictate, you have to take advantage of that. So you have to be patient and wait for that miss, wait for that opportunity. Safe, opportunistic, we talked about that. Simple, right? When the game is wide open, it tends to be pretty simple. You spend less time thinking about these crazy possible outcomes. And of course, there's time to read the ice and wait, because when you're throwing hits, you don't need to have that precision just yet. Okay, so let's talk about some tactics. We're going back to the offensive first column. So the tactics we're going to use: rocks in play. Lots of rocks in play is aggressive, is risky, but that's offensive. Freezes, the hardest shot in curling to make, is aggressive. Come around draws, so drawing in behind guards. Tap backs, lots of guards, of course, and corner freezes, of course, as well. Now, similarly, let's talk about defensive first. So we're talking about playing it open, not having a lot of rocks in play. Peels. For those of you that don't know, a peel is a hit where the shooting rock also leaves the area of play. So if you hit and roll out of play, that is a peel. Hit and roll is a peel that doesn't go quite as far. So you hit and then you roll to a spot that's still in play. Run throughs or run backs is similar to a tap up, but a tap up, the stone that you hit stays in play, where a run through is you're hitting a stone into another stone to take that other stone out. We're going to play in the rings and sort of invite that hitting game. Fewer guards in play, right? And of course, hits are a tactic we would use when we're defensive first. So does that make sense for everyone? Any questions before we move on? Okay. So offensive basic style tends to be more aggressive, potentially risky. There's going to be a large number of rocks in play to maximize scoring. So we're going to look at this. This is similar to what we saw in the basic strategy section, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. But you can see, offensive first, we have a lot of rocks in play. Defensive first, there tend to be fewer rocks in play. We're going to minimize our opponent's scoring, and we're able to switch to offensive when required. That's the opportunistic part that we were talking about before, taking that chance when it presents itself. Oops, sorry. Okay. So offensive tactics, we talked about this briefly. Finesse shots are draws, tap backs, and freezes. You need to have finesse, you need to have precision to be able to make those shots consistently. Takeout game only when you have a big lead. So you're an offensive team, you tend to play a lot of offensive shots, and then you run up the score, you now have a 6-point lead in the fourth end. You might switch to be a little more defensive at that point to protect the scoreboard. So the scoreboard is now dictating your style. So you can always switch between them. And what must we be good at? Reading the ice. It's very important. If you're throwing finesse shots, you need to be able to read the ice properly. That is the line and the weight both. And of course, line calling and weight judgment. That's ice reading. Okay, defensive now. Basic style. We're controlling or limiting our opponent's opportunities. So we have to be patient. There's not going to be a lot of scoring going on. You're going to see low scoring games when you have two defensive teams playing each other. And of course, you got to wait for those opportunities. When you see that miss happen, you got to, on a dime, switch to playing offensively. Obviously, we're going to play it in the rings and play more of a hit game when we're being defensive. Now, balanced. This is like how I play. You have to be opportunistic. It's a balance between patience and aggression. It's risk versus reward. Aggressive with the hammer, defensive without. That's exactly how I was saying that I play earlier. And then, of course, take your chances when the scoring dictates. So I know we just did that pretty quickly, but does anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll move on. So let's talk about now switching from basic style to a game plan. So the game plan is developed to maximize winning. So we have all these things in our funnel that we're going to put into our funnel, and the outcome is going to be winning. So we're going to utilize information from our opposition. Does our opponent like to throw a lot of hits? Let's try to goat them into a draw game. Is our opponent tend to be more aggressive? Let's try to goat them into a hit game. The playing conditions. If the ice is playing very straight, it's much harder to draw around your guard. If the ice is playing very swingy, it's much harder to make precision tapbacks. So your plan might be adjusted based on the playing conditions. And of course, your team's basic style. So we're taking all of these things, and that's creating our game plan. Okay, so how do we know about our opposition? How do we know how they play? Well, if you're in a league and you play against them frequently, you have some information from previous games. If you're in a bonspiel and you've never seen them before, you could maybe watch them in their previous draw before you play them. We can use statistics on a higher level. The folks on TV, all of their games are recorded and they have stats that are widely publicized. And you want to compare your strengths and weaknesses of your opponent and your team. So, for example, your opponent might know that you're a hitter, but they're also a hitter, so they're going to let you play the hit game. And you could do the same to them. So better at hits, offensive versus defensive, that sort of thing. So we're going to use that information to create our game plan. Also, the playing conditions. We talked about this briefly already as well. So conditions can and will affect the types of shots that are selected. If you're in an arena and it's the middle of the summer, you know there's going to be frost on that ice because of the humidity, right? So that will change your shot selection. Keen ice is ice that is fast and swingy, right? So keen ice with curl will make it easier to play finesse shots. So drawing around a guard, the swingier the ice is, the more opportunity you have to get behind that guard. Slow, straight ice will force a more defensive game because it's harder to get around that guard with the draw. But you can still play tapbacks and things like that. You can still get rocks behind guards. You're just not going to play those draw type shots. Okay, and now we're narrowing it down even further to an end goal. So we went over this chart when we did the beginner strategy or the basic strategy. So let's do this quickly. I'm not going to call on hands here because we've already gone through this. So when we have the hammer, our objective is to score 2. What is acceptable is either blanking or taking 1. What is unacceptable is giving up 1. And what is the bonus is taking more than 2. Any questions about that? We've already gone over this, so there shouldn't be. But if you do, now is a great opportunity to bring it up. Okay.
Hey, Matt, I just have
Yeah.
a comment or a question on one of your thing about statistics and saying that higher level curlers have statistics widely publicized.
Yeah.
You know, it's really easy at the club level or at a bonspiel to just ask somebody, and they will be very free to tell you what they think of a possible opponent of yours.
Yes,
And they'll tell you what
absolutely.
they like to do. So it's not hard at all. It might take one drink.
Yes, absolutely. It might not even take one drink. It might take one chuckle. Hey, I'm playing that guy Dan Hazlitt. What do you know about him? Take that information with a grain of salt, though, I would say, because
Yeah, fair enough.
sometimes people might think one thing, and then you go out on the ice with a particular plan, and you realize your opponent is doing the exact opposite. So always be willing to adjust as the game plays out. But yes, good comment, Dan. Thank you. So, okay, without the hammer, we're going to go quickly again. Our objective, force the opponent to 1. What is acceptable is letting your opponent have 2. What is unacceptable is anything more than 2. And of course, the bonus is a steal. Any questions about that? We did go over it, but again, a great opportunity to ask if you have any questions. And again, like we said before, when you do not have the hammer, you don't get to decide if you can blank or not, so blank is not here. Okay, so remember, when you have the hammer, you're playing to the outer thirds. When you do not have the hammer, you're playing to the inner third. The control zone is from the tee line forward to about a 2 guard in the center between the 4-foot strings. Offensive tactics, we tend to be higher up on the sheet. Defensive tactics, we tend to be lower down in the sheet, closer to the house or in the house. Okay, before we move on, any questions about that? Okay. Now let's talk about rocks behind the tee line. So opponent's rocks behind the tee line are your friends, because when their rocks are behind, they become catchers for your rocks. So you can get your rocks in and then not have an opportunity for your opponent to get them out. And so that makes us smile. Everybody sees why opponent's rocks behind the tee line are our friend, correct? Okay, so we're going to go through some scenarios, and we'll call on people, or hopefully people will volunteer to give some answers, and I'll do my best to draw as best I can. So for every one of these scenarios, we're going to be doing the same basic setup. So you're playing at a new club, a club you are not familiar with. So this is, for example, a bonspiel, and it's your first game at that bonspiel. It's the Hackers Curling Club. The ice curls 3 feet inside and out. Dan asked his buddy that he met at the bar, hey, what's the ice like here at Hackers Curling Club? And they said, oh yeah, well, it curls about 3 feet, both in and out. And then your team is equally good at hits and draws, so we can play as offensively as we want or as defensively as we want. And your team curls 75%, which is similar to your opponent. So this is important because I would say most everybody on this call today probably does not normally curl 75%. I could say that I probably don't. I could see Dion right now shaking his head that he probably does, but other than Dion, probably most of us don't. All right, so 75% means we're more than likely to make whatever shot we call, but once in a while we are going to miss a shot here and there. Okay, so there are 3 of these scenarios, and we're going to go through all 3 of them. Scenario number 1. It's the first end. You have the hammer. Of course, we're unfamiliar with the playing conditions because it's the first end of the first game. And your basic style is similar to your opponent. Okay, so the opponent is throwing up center guard. Now, who wants to volunteer to give us one option that we might call? Phil, I see Phil West.
I'd draw in behind right away.
Phil wants to draw in behind.
Top 8, yeah.
So, Phil, why don't you tell me why you're going to do that?
Early on, I'd want to be playing a more defensive game.
Okay.
And until I've played on the ice a little bit more and understand it.
Okay, so you want to be defensive, so therefore you want to play in the house. But the one thing I will say is you're allowing your opponent to control the control zone by putting it in the center like that, right? So there, you know that your opponent wants rocks in the control zone, and now you're giving them a rock in the control zone.
It is hard. I mean, being the first stone and not removing it unless you feel good of just being able to move it over a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not an easy shot.
So let's see if I can do the highlight here. So there's one thing I want to point out to you, and that's over here. These are unfamiliar playing conditions. So chances are you could do that, even though you called this, or you could do that, even though you called this, because you're not sure what the weight is, because it's the first end and we've only seen one rock.
Sure.
Right? So you're giving yourself a wide range of opportunities to help your opponent. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Anybody else have any other ideas?
You can go in, but just go to the wings.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey.
So Kevin is saying, I'm going to agree with Phil, and I want to be offensive, but I just don't want to put it behind their guard. So I'm going to put one in the rings, but out to the side. Something like that.
Yeah. You at least get away from the center, and if you're heavy, if you're light, you end up with a guard.
Yeah. That's not a bad option. Phil, do you see why Kevin might do that instead of what you called? Phil? All right. I guess we lost Phil. No problem. Anybody else have any other options that they would choose?
Yeah, I have. So being unfamiliar with the ice, I would try to do a high corner guard and just see first and foremost if it curls the way I want to and if the speed of the ice. So that way, if I'm a little heavy, it might be a lower corner guard, but it's still going to be a guard. It's not going to sail through.
So you like that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now Dustin is going a little more offensive, right? He's playing a higher guard, but he's giving himself an opportunity for possibly being a little heavy because knowing that it's the first end, he trusts that his lead knows that it's going to be slow and might throw a little heavier. And if it's not as heavy as you thought, it's going to go a little deeper, maybe end up here. Okay, so that's also a good option. Anybody else have any other options?
I still like going in, and even if it's heavy and you go through, you could still end up with an opportunity to blank and keep the hammer for the second when you'll know the ice better.
So you're calling for this instead of up here.
Yeah, either or. But if if you are light, you'll still get the guard. And if you're heavy and you go through, it's not bad.
Yep, also a good option. So that's a little more defensive. So far we've had 3 people that like being defensive and 1 person, Dustin, being offensive. Anybody else like to be offensive that has an option? Whoever's got your hand up, you can just go ahead.
Jennifer and Jason may have
Right,
something to say.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Corner guard.
Where? Where in the corner, Jennifer? Did we lose Jennifer?
Either side above. Outside the house, either side.
So you want to play closer to the house, so something like this?
Not touching the rings. Yep. Closer.
Yeah, so that's also a good option. If the lead is a little bit light, it ends up being a little higher, not the end of the world. The lead's a little bit heavy, it ends up a little bit deeper, not the end of the world either. If it ends up even in the house a little bit, not the end of the world as well. So that's a good middle first end type of option as well. Good. So you guys can see there's no one right or wrong answer here, right? That's the point in all of this. Your strategy or your tactics are going to be based on your strategy and all those other conditions that we talked about. Good. Good job, everyone. Before we move on, any other options that we haven't exhausted here? I think we've probably exhausted all of them.
I got
Oh,
one.
Matt,
Can you hear me?
you're really aggressive.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
It says Richard. You could be really aggressive. You could do a tick shot to move them off the center and then roll in.
Well, all right, I already started erasing everything, but
that's not a good. That's not a good move. But it's very aggressive.
right, so we had that guard there. So Rich wants to play the tick, move the black to there, and have the red roll to there, something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
You had it
First
closer.
end, first shot on unfamiliar ice. Your shot percentage there is maybe 1%.
Well, that's why I said it's very aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, so different story late in the game. But I think in the first end, that's
No,
probably not a shot we would want to call. All right, good. Good job, everyone. Okay, so let's move on to scenario number 2. It is the last end. You have the hammer, and you're down 3. So we have to score 3 to tie or 4 to win, no matter what. It is the first vice red rock. So it's rock number 5 for the hammer team. So let's see if we can hear from somebody we haven't heard from yet. Who has an option for what they would call? Mike Nags, go ahead.
I would try to remove the high yellow rock over. Yeah, right there.
So you're going to hit that, and then where are you going to roll?
Hit and roll.
Roll to where?
Not too much into the center, but in the house.
So like to there. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, that's it.
Okay. So now tell me, why would you do that? Mike, you still with me? Mike, are you there?
Mike, he said Mike. Which one?
All right, we lost Mike. Is there anybody else who would do the same shot as Mike that wants to speak up about why they would do that shot?
Yeah, this is Mike.
Okay, another mic. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
That's
So
okay.
yeah, rather than that one, I think I'd like to do a hit and roll on their shot rock and then sit behind their roll to the, I guess the right as we're looking at the screen, but sit behind their yellow high guard.
So you want to hit that
Yep.
and then roll to,
Yep. Right about there.
right? That's what you're calling for?
Yes.
Okay. And now tell me why.
Number one, it gets their shot rock onto there. It sets me up, possibly two. Hopefully I can come in. They're going to try and take out one of mine, but with my next few rocks, I can either replace that and finish with the three that I need.
Okay. That's one option. I will say that this rock, I mean, it's tough to tell because the board is on an angle, but this rock is a little bit covered. So it's not an easy shot, but it's there. So that's one option. Good. What else? Who has another option? Russell, I think, is you had your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
Go ahead.
What about drawing behind the high guard to split the house as your next shot?
So you're saying,
well, not the guard, but the one at the top, the one of the top 12.
On the yellow one.
Come behind.
So you want to go
behind? Yeah, right there.
Oops, sorry.
Well, it was there.
Yeah,
that's like my
fault.
shot.
So you want to go over here?
Yeah.
Okay. Now tell me why.
I want to split the house.
Okay.
With the shot, and that sets you up for, well, depending on what comes up next. You've got the house split. You can then start moving in closer to the center, and maybe, depending on what happens the next time, take out the yellow rock that's in the 4-foot.
Yeah, I mean, if you go there, yellow is going to have a couple of options. So I'll be yellow in this instance. Okay, so either yellow is going to, oh, I don't really want to be yellow because it's hard to see. I'll use black. Yellow's either going to want to go there, or the other option would be to peel this guard out and open it up. So those would be the two options that yellow would go for most likely.
I was gonna block it out.
Or I guess another option for yellow would be, you know, assuming your rock was there, would be to get in there.
No. They're gonna.
That's what yells into. You'll never get three.
Yeah. What if you sat right on that shot rock?
So, okay, give me
Where
one
your
second.
second, where that one was.
So instead of going, oh, we're on black still. So instead of going over here, who's speaking now? Rich, is that you? You want to now go here?
No, I wouldn't go there if I was yellow.
Phil said
Oh,
that.
oh, Phil, I'm sorry. Phil, you want to go there?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one option. Now tell me why that would be good or bad.
Well, it sets you up for. It's hard to take that one out especially if you manage to get it frozen against their yellow. For them, but if you come down and tap yours, you might be able to push them back out on the next shot.
Yeah. So this is the high risk, high reward shot, right?
Sure.
So we give ourselves
Down
a
by
chance
three,
to get
down
3
by
or 4 here, but we have to give ourselves that chance because this is the last end and we're down 3, right?
Yep.
So the idea being, if you do that, what's yellow going to do? And if I'm yellow, I'm probably going to either peel the guard or try to find a way to get in here so that I can knock some rocks around with my next shot. Because if I'm yellow, I don't care if you score 2. I just don't want you scoring 3.
Yeah, puts them into a high risk situation if they have to come down on top of that one.
Right. So that's a good option. Russell, you still have your hand up. Do you have more to say?
Oh, I didn't know how to turn it down. No, but I just thought of another shot. Another shot could be a hit and roll on the one in the 4 foot. Try to roll toward the right. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I think that was Mike suggested that earlier. Somebody suggested that earlier.
Okay.
So as long as we're talking about it, Russell, why would that be good or bad? Russell, you need to unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, it's good because you've split the house again, which I really like. I like playing that.
Yeah.
You're set up for 3. What's really bad is you've opened up the button in the 4 foot.
Yeah, but there's really no center guards or guards to worry about. And as the hammer team, having the 4 foot open is a good thing, right? So that's not a bad play either. The one thing it does do is it puts your rock behind the tee, right? Because the angle that we have to hit, once we roll off, we're definitely going to roll off behind the tee somewhere. So as long as this rock counts above that rock, it's actually not a bad play because it gives you, like you said, the split house, gives you that front open or the open front. If I'm yellow, I have the eraser on. Give me a second. Pen. If I'm yellow and you did that, I have really 2 options. Peel this guard, which 99% of the shots we're going to call tonight, that's going to be an option for yellow, right? And then the other option is to either freeze on that or to put this one back maybe. Those would be like the 3 options that yellow would have. Putting it back is probably bad because you're just going to hit and roll again. Freezing here is not bad. I would probably call the peel personally because if I peel that out, what's red going to do? They're probably going to draw in all likelihood, right? Something like this or like this. Or even freeze on this one. But red's going to draw in somewhere. And then I'm going to play, oops, sorry. As yellow, I'm going to play this hit and either roll center or try to roll to the freeze here. That's a lot of drawing, a lot of junk, but you get the idea, right? So it's good. It's an option. Makes yellow think, which is good. Makes yellow have to be precise, which is good. What else? Any other options out there?
I just had a question. This is Jason.
Go ahead.
If we're in this, I guess we're in this situation, we're thinking from the perspective of red, right?
Yes, you are the red team.
I guess my question would just be, but maybe just slightly off topic, but why would yellow have so many rocks in the house if they were up by 3?
Oh, because, you know, red is trying to set up a big end and yellow keeps hitting and then rolling.
All right.
You know, so they're not getting the peels that they were looking for, or
So some mistakes are happening or something like that.
potentially. We don't really know, but
Yeah.
there's always some scenario that,
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
you know, maybe maybe there was a bunch of junk in the middle that got opened up later. Tough to say. All right. Anything else? So we had some varying options there. We had some freezes. We had some hits, hit and rolls. So we had a good mixture of offensive and defensive play. Daniel, go ahead. Daniel, you have a question or an option?
I think Daniel has to put his hand up if he hasn't. Oh, there he goes. should be able to unmute yourself, Daniel.
Okay, so what if we drew around the outside past the red guard enough to touch the 8 foot?
So you want to go here.
That would work. On the T line as well would be fine.
Oh, you're saying draw to like here?
Anywhere along that line, as long as we're out counting the stone in the back. I guess
Yeah.
too deep would be bad, but it's not terrible.
So why would that be good or bad? Either of those two locations, why would those be good or bad?
So yellow trying to hit is going to have to take a lot less ice coming around that guard, which makes it hard. It gives you a second stone in play without making it harder to take out shot rock. So it's both defendable and a stone that could score you a point. However, it is a higher percentage shot because it has to touch 8 foot to be useful.
Yeah, I will say I like this one more than this one. And here's why. I'm going to tell you exactly why. Because if you throw it to that first spot, the one that I said I prefer, the only shot that yellow is likely to call at that point is the peel.
They have to, yes.
They have to, right? So then what are you going to do after yellow peels that red out? Now you're red. What you're going to do is hit that guy and roll over here and sit 3. So now you're sitting 3 and you have the hammer, which means if yellow doesn't make a double, you can get your 3.
Yeah.
Right? So I definitely like this one better than this one. Now, because they're locked on each other, it's a tough double for yellow to make, but it is makeable.
Well, so it depends on how you kind of play it, I guess. So if instead of trying to remove the yellow stone that shot rock, if you leave it there and just draw the other wing to split the house, then trying to play that double jam in the back, and they still end up losing their shot rock.
Oh, right, but if you leave that yellow there,
right,
so let me... So you leave that yellow there, and instead you draw it over here, right? Yellow's still counting 1. You're not counting 3, and this guard is gone. So yellow's just going to play the hit game on you. They're either gonna run this back, or if it's showing enough, they're going to try to hit this side of it, right? Once you play this freeze here, and they go to the peel, you have to get rid of this yellow and sit 3 for the end to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to sit 3 and trade 1s to get your 3. If you're not sitting 3, trading 1s doesn't help you. Because then at some point, you're going to have to make a double to get your 3.
True, yeah.
But yeah, good idea. That's another option for sure. Anybody else before we go on to scenario 3?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? This is David.
Hi, David.
Why not, instead of freeze on the 4 foot, if you can come in and get to the outside of that to tap that yellow on the 4 foot back, and then slide your red just behind your one sitting inside the 8 foot.
So you want to tap the yellow back.
Yep. And slide to the left, our left. It's now double guard.
So really the yellow is going to go that way.
Yep. If they peel, you put it back. If they peel a high guard, you put it right back up. And then eventually you'll have a choice in terms of, if they peel it, you can now draw for your 3.
Yeah, so that's a tough one only because of how close the red and the yellow are to each other.
Right.
I'm speaking left to right, not front to back. So that would be a tough shot. In all likelihood, you'd end up nosing. And so you're going to put the red there, and the yellow is going to end up there.
So the question is, if they try to take it out, they may jam on either one of those 2 in the back.
Yeah.
So you still be sitting 2 with the option of drawing for 3?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good junk play. good. Anybody else? All right, we're starting to get a little short on time, so let's move on to 3. This will be the last scenario. It is the 8th end. You are the red team, so you do not have the hammer. And now you're up by 3. And it's the lead's second stone. So you threw to the top 4. Then yellow said, I need to score 3, so I'm going to ignore you and throw the corner guard anyway. And now you get to go again. So I'm going to call out Rich here for a second. Rich, we're not in the first end anymore. You want to be super aggressive? Did we lose Rich? I figured Rich would want to call for the tick shot here.
Rich needs to put his hand up if he's here, and then I'll see it immediately and let it unmute him.
Okay. I was really just teasing him anyway. Oh, there he is. Go ahead, Rich.
Sure, we'll go for the. Either I'm going to do the tick shot or I'm going to draw in again.
I definitely would not do the tick shot up 3.
But yeah, I probably just draw in.
So where are you going to draw?
Draw to the top.
Top center,
Top
so like
center.
here?
Yeah, or a little further under the guard.
Or over here, you're saying?
Yeah, maybe between the two, so I prevent them from drawing behind the guard.
Well, here's one thing I want you to be wary about with that, okay?
All right.
If you put it, if you put it here, and of course my drawing is pretty bad, but yellow could potentially make a double and roll under the guard. Ignore my bad drawing, but I think you get the idea. So you just got to be careful not to give them the double to roll under the guard.
Right. So I draw under the guard.
So you could go under the guard. That's one option. Anybody else have a hand up? Want to give an option?
Hi, it's Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was thinking you could even just tap ours back a little bit to the button and sit
Yeah.
there.
So go there and put that one to there.
Mm-hmm.
Even back 4 is not the end of the world.
Back 4, yeah.
Yep, that's an option as well. Now, what's good or bad about that option, Jeff?
Well, I don't want to give them something to sit on. I don't want to give them a double that they can, roll behind their
so
guard.
anytime you give them a double where they can end up behind their guard, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing you got to watch out for with that.
Right.
But otherwise, good.
Yeah. So
Anybody else?
More separation is better.
Yeah. So even going like this is not all bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now that double to sit over here is gone.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Kathy, that's a nude face. Go ahead, Kathy.
Peel the red, open it all up, get rid of everything in the house.
You don't sound like a Kathy.
That's Chuck, not Kathy.
That's Kathy's right next to me.
So you're saying peel your own. The more open it is, the less likely they are to get 3.
Yep.
Yeah, possible. If you're going to do that, why put it there in the first place? So I would say throw it through next time with the first rock, but obviously you didn't get to decide where the first rock went. So, but yeah, absolutely. That's an option.
Just because I threw the first one light, Chuck.
Yeah, that happens.
Anybody else have any other options?
I was just wondering if you could draw behind the yellow, but all the way down to the T line.
You want to go here?
Yeah, like way down in there.
Yeah, that's a possibility. The negative of that is now you gave something yellow to freeze to.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they could be counting second shot and behind a guard.
Okay.
But if you place it perfectly, it could work. Anybody else who's got a hand up? I see there's 8 hands up, but I don't know who they are. So maybe Dan, if you want to help me out.
Hey, Matt, this is Mike.
Mike Nags, go ahead.
Well, what's wrong with a center line number 3 guard?
You want to do that?
Yes, as close to the rings as possible, but not in the house.
Okay, tell me why.
They can't remove it for another 3 stones, and you're junking up the middle of the center third.
Okay. I would say if you tend to be an aggressive playing team, that is an option. My personal taste, I would not go for that. And the reason is the scoreboard is dictating to keep it open, and I don't want to play any guards. But that's me as a balanced style strategist, right? I'm not saying it's a no-go, but certainly not an option that I personally would pick. I see Curtis, do you have a question?
Oh, I was going to mention Rob. Rob's ready, I think.
You're going to mention Rob. Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Hey y'all.
Hi Rob.
The one thing I was thinking was you could do a center guard, because if you look at the scoreboard, they seem to be trying to play aggressive and they're not capitalizing on it. So my first, who just said don't let Rob talk? Rude. Either peel out your own, because the more rocks in play is just going to help them out. But it seems like they can't be aggressive because they either give up 2 or allow for us to steal. So
So we've stolen a couple of times, which means we've probably been playing pretty aggressively and it's worked, right? So knowing just based on what we see here on the scoreboard, we could say that, aggressive play is maybe working for us. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of a thing. In which case, like Mike just said, play that center guard. It's an option. Again, as a balanced style curler, I probably wouldn't choose that, but that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. Anybody else?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Not much. What about coming in about the same height as that one that's already in on our right side there, just so that they can't double anything out?
Right there.
Another problem stone for them.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's actually the call that I made on this shot. Believe it or not. So yes, I agree. This is a good option. Let's talk about it though. You have to be perfect. Of course, my line is not flat, but you have to be perfectly flat to the other stone so that it prevents the double. Right? We don't want to give them a double. If we put it up here, they could hit like that, maybe even roll up behind, probably not, probably just sit there. Or if we put it a little too far back, they could hit and double that way. So you want to make sure that that rock is perfectly flat if you're going to do that. But yes, splitting the house, now we're shrinking that scoring zone. We're making it harder for them to get that 3. Absolutely. Good job.
With that shot, this is David. Quick question.
Go ahead.
With that shot there, if they now come in and sit on the inside of that, how do you worry? Now they've got one in and it's hard to get that one out.
So we've got that. And then you're saying they would call what to sit on that middle one, to sit here? Is that what you're saying?
Sit on the outside.
Oh,
the one there.
here.
Yes.
That is a shot that they could do. My guess is they probably wouldn't. But yeah, I mean,
Just
if
then,
they,
would you just take them both out? Then yellow would just come in and take them both out.
yeah, if yellow
I
put
mean,
that
red.
rock
You would
there,
red come in and take them both out.
yeah, if yellow put that rock there and I'm red, I'm hitting right there.
Hope it doesn't jam.
Yeah. I mean, with them being as flat as they are, you're not likely to have a jam. It only looks like a potential jam here because of how poorly I'm drawing with the tools available on PowerPoint here.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else? Go ahead. Any other options? All right, good. Good job, everyone. So I think the point is, obviously, there's no one right answer. There's no wrong answers here. If it works for you, right? You have to know what's good for your team. I liked the fact that Rob was looking at the scoreboard and saying, we're a team that has been aggressive throughout this game. I liked the fact that Jeff realized that he can't leave a double option for himself. So he wants to tap it back even a little further, right? All those things are the thought process that we need to go through. And I like the fact that Nate said, keep it flat, so that we can't give a double. So that was good too, Nate. And all of you all had great ideas. So really good thinking. The point is to think about it, right? Like that's the exercise we're doing here. What are shots that we're going to call that give us the best advantage later on throughout the end? So keep thinking, keep practicing. There's a lot of resources out there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Dion, you had a question? Dion, is your hand up?
It is. Dion just needs to unmute themselves.
There we go, finally. Several people on the chat asked if you were going to make these slides available, Matt.
The slides are a little difficult to make available, but we are recording this. And Dion, as our official GNCC webmaster, maybe you can help me get this up on YouTube or something so that people can see the slides.
Yeah, that has come up before. I'm not sure if the GNCC has a YouTube account yet, but if you have one that you can put it on, we can certainly link to it and everything, and then we can share it on Facebook as well.
Yeah, so we can definitely put it up on Facebook. We can definitely figure out a way to share the slides. The difficult thing is, like for example, if we were to share this on Facebook, I'd have to make PDFs out of every individual slide, and that gets a little cumbersome.
The Finger Lakes Curling Club has a YouTube channel, which we could put it on if the GNCC doesn't have a better option.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
we don't have one at the moment, but I have been asked in the past if it's just that the GNCC hasn't even set up like a Google account or anything. So I'll have.
Well, this is a great opportunity, Dion.
We'll definitely work something out one way or another to get this information off to you folks. One thing I will say is strategy is just as important to practice as anything else that we do, right? So you can watch games on YouTube and you can say to yourself, what would I do if I was the people that I'm watching? If you're a 5 and under curler, there's no reason to watch the Olympic games and the World Championship games. Find a local 5 and under that had some YouTube, streams going and watch those games, because those are the types of games that you will be playing and situations that you would put yourself in. So you don't necessarily have to watch elite curling to find curling that you can practice strategy with. For those of you that can see my screen on the video, there's a couple of books that I do recommend. This is one of them. It's called Curl to Win by Russ Howard. Russ Howard, of course, is the commentator on the TSN stream feeds. So Briar and Scotty's and all kinds of Canadian championships and things. He's one of the greatest curling minds in the game. He wrote this book in the 90s, so it not only does not talk about the 5-rock rule, it doesn't even talk about the 4-rock rule. They're talking about the 3-rock rule in this game, but primarily there's a lot of scenarios you can see. He does pictures and he has arrows and stuff. Really good opportunity to do some learning. It is available on YouTube, or excuse me, on Amazon. This is a book that may or may not be out of print, but Curling for Dummies, one of the books I bought early on in my curling career. Not as advanced as Russ's book in terms of strategy, but a decent book nevertheless. There's another book that I actually have out on loan to a friend at the moment. So, Dan, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share my screen one more time.
Sure.
If I can find it. There it is. So this is on Amazon. It's a book called Introduction to Curling Strategy by Gabrielle Coleman. I personally find this book to be the best strategy-related book for beginning curlers who are trying to improve and learn how to be situationally aware. So that's another book. Again, I have that out on loan to a friend at the moment, but that's a good one that I do recommend. And talk to your friends. Do magnet board games. I made this magnet board here off of items that I found on Amazon for all of about $20. It's just a cheap picture frame. There's a thin metal sheet inside behind the cardboard and behind the paper that I printed. And then my stones, I'll hold this up so you can see. It's just a bunch of pennies glued together with a magnet on the back. So I stacked, in this case, 4 pennies up. So it cost 4 cents plus the cost of the magnet. Probably cost me about 15 cents to make each stone. And we play with this all the time at our club, and we just talk about situational things. So if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns, happy to answer them, or we can talk in the chat. We can stick around and do some Zoom stacking if people are interested. Hopefully you guys were having a beer or something while you were listening to me for the last 2 hours. I can't be all that interesting. 2 beers, Gina? All right. D. Bowers, yeah, you're very welcome. Not a problem at all. Curling for Dummies can't beat the $3.99 Kindle price. Yeah, there you go.
Hey y'all, I've had a lot of people. I kind of bombed this image, this on my iPad. There is a free app known as Curl Strategy that is essentially the magnet board version that Matt Shiner had mentioned. Yes. So for those of you who, what's really great about this here is that there are save options as images. So if you want to, draw up different scenarios on here and save them, and you can talk to them, different people, you're more than welcome to. And then the other thing I like, there is a game called The Last Rock that is really great with just working on strategy. You do tend to need to know how to, be finicky with the controls on it a little bit, but it is a really good option. It gives you different levels of difficulty that you can play with and really see. It's got the 4-rock rule. It hasn't been updated for the 5-rock rule yet, but this has kind of been one of those things that's helped me out. And I like to say that I am only a subpar skip rather than mediocre. So one day hopes, but I just play with this a lot, and that's helped me out little bits. So
yeah, thank you, Rob. I definitely have that magnet board curling app on my phone and on my iPad. The one thing I will say about the various curling games out there for our devices is watch out for the physics. A lot of times the physics in those games doesn't match real life. So if you're trying to make shots on that game or sometimes you can make shots on the game that you can't make in real life, I guess is what I'm saying. So just be careful. But yeah, from a strategy perspective, it's a pretty decent way to practice as well. So good job, Rob. Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? All right. Well, once again, I want to extend my thanks to Dan Hazlitt for being the administrator of this program, as well as offering up his Zoom account to us. So couldn't have done it without you, Dan. So appreciate that. And for those of you who are involved in the GNCC, if you're a GNCC rep or a club president or something, the annual GNCC meeting is going to be online via Zoom this year. So look out for the announcements for that. Tonight's plan was to sort of test out how the system works and make sure we can use it. And so as successful as it was tonight, I think the recommendation to the rest of the board is to go ahead with the virtual board meeting this summer. I think first weekend of June, if memory serves. Dion or Dan, do you recall?
June 6th comes to mind.
June 6th, which is a Saturday. Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's
9 o'clock in the morning, I think, is the
Yeah.
the date and time that I saw. And they haven't released, you're right, they haven't released any more details about the platform or the link or anything yet, but it is going to be, Zoom seems like it works. So.
Yeah. And for any of you who are not a GNCC rep or not a club president, you are still welcome to come to that meeting and listen in and hear about the goings on in your region. You're just not allowed to vote.
Say they're encouraged.
Yes, yes, very much so. So to all of you who are thanking us on the chat, you're very welcome. We're happy to do it. If anybody has any questions, you can email me. It's matt@licurling.org. It's easy to remember, so feel free to email me if you have any questions or you want to discuss any of the topics that we talked about tonight. Any further, I'd be happy. You can find me on Facebook. If anybody is interested in looking for me on Facebook, feel free to reach out.